Lockheed Martin is having a tough year, losing out on new Air Force and Navy fighter contract opportunities in March and then announcing $1.6 billion in Q2 losses in July. But this legendary aircraft manufacturer still has at least one technological ace up its sleeve, a highly classified aeronautics program that Lockheed CEO Jim Taiclet describes as a game-changing capability. And while details about this effort are really tough to come by, there is a mountain of circumstantial evidence pointing toward one distinct possibility: a new intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and strike platform capable of penetrating deep into the most heavily contested airspace on the planet to gather timely intelligence or to conduct rapid strikes against targets that no other aircraft could reach. But rather than relying on extreme low observability, as we've seen in other Lockheed programs like the F-22 or the F-35 or the RQ-170, this new ISR and strike platform would see the return of brute force power, speed, and altitude to render enemy air defenses moot. It would scream across the sky at Mach 6 or more, altering its course at inconsistent intervals to make calculating an intercept for surface-to-air missiles all but impossible, flying at altitudes that no fighter could reach to intercept and striking targets anywhere in the world with only a few hours' notice. That's right, you guys know what I'm gonna say next. Let's talk about the distinct possibility that Lockheed's legendary Skunk Works is burning through whole heaps of cash building the SR-72, a turbine-based combined cycle engine-powered successor to the reigning king of speed, the SR-71 Blackbird. But just for good measure, we'll also briefly touch on some other things this budget-gobbling secret program could be building, because we know the contracts exist, we know the program exists, and we know the cost overruns exist. And all that points to one question: what could Lockheed Skunk Works be building with billions of dollars worth of classified funding? I'm Alex Hollings, and this is Air Power. The SR-71 Blackbird, often called the Habu by the men who flew it, was an engineering marvel so spectacular that its high-speed records still stand today, more than a quarter century since the last Blackbird left service. But you might be surprised to know that there were only ever 32 of these legendary aircraft built. And that is exactly why I was so excited to work with Rec Watches to show you this limited edition timepiece built using titanium that was actually sourced from a real SR-71. Blackbird number 617956 to be exact, which was the most flown Blackbird of the entire production line, with some 1,454 missions under its belt, mostly training new Habu pilots thanks to its raised rear cockpit for instructors. This titanium-cased watch has great cockpit styling, with brushed hands meant to resemble the Blackbird's silhouette, a crown guard designed to be reminiscent of the Habu's jet inlet spikes, and an FKM rubber strap with red stripes meant to conjure images of the no-step zones on the aircraft itself. But the coolest part of this watch is the lower dial, which integrates titanium pulled directly from the Blackbird's legendary J58 turbojet engine's nacelle exhaust ejectors, or you might know them as turkey feathers. And I don't think I can overstate how cool this is, so instead I'm just gonna level with you guys and tell you that as soon as I heard about these watches, I ordered one for myself. And while I certainly don't consider myself a watch collector, I do have a few great watches, and this one really stands out for its incredible craftsmanship and, genuinely, its style. And if you want your own Habu timepiece, Rec Watches has agreed to help me give you a great deal. Rec Watches is currently offering a 15% discount when you pre-order your Habu timepiece for the next production batch. And if you use my promo code, SAND, you'll get another 10% off. And altogether, that's almost $600 off the price of this watch. So if you want to own a piece of the most legendary aircraft of all time, just like I do, go to recwatches.com to pre-order your Habu timepiece today, or just follow the link in the description below. And again, don't forget to use my promo code SAND to save another 10% on top of the 15% discount you'll already get on what is genuinely the coolest watch on the market today. We've discussed Lockheed Martin's now legendary SR-72 program several times on this channel before, so while I will be briefly summarizing what we've learned about this effort in the past, I really recommend that you go back and watch these videos in their entirety if you want the nuts and bolts details. Now, legends of a faster, higher-flying replacement for the SR-71 really started to emerge all the way back in the 80s, with many arguing that the US would not retire the spy plane without an even more capable replacement in service. But the truth was that the SR-71 was an immensely expensive aircraft to operate, and popular misconceptions about the capabilities of spy satellites, combined with advancing adversary air defense technologies, led many lawmakers to believe that spy planes were becoming a thing of the past. Of course, that belief would soon be proven entirely wrong, with the Blackbird's first retirement only lasting 5 years before it was pulled back into active service again in 1994, only to be retired again in 1999 and very nearly brought back into service again in 2001. And since then, the United States has invested heavily into new ISR aircraft, like the RQ-4 Global Hawk and the highly secretive RQ-180, while also funding significant upgrades for older ISR aircraft like the still-in-service U-2 spy plane. Spy satellites, while vital for America's modern military operations, just can't do the job alone. Satellites follow very predictable orbital flight paths, making it pretty easy to hide secrets from them as long as you know when they'll be overhead. They're only ever over a target area for minutes at a time, and reorienting a spy satellite to get a better look at something depletes its precious little onboard fuel, shortening the lifespan of a multi-billion-dollar asset just to get a peek at something on the ground. It can often take 10 years or more to get a new spy satellite into orbit, meaning they often carry older sensor packages than the latest gear stuffed into an aircraft, and you can carry much larger and heavier ISR payloads in a plane than you'd usually find in a satellite. That's all to say that satellites are not the all-seeing, omnipresent eyes in the sky that they're often made out to be, and truly effective intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or ISR, can only be done through a combination of satellites and aircraft working in concert. It was with this understanding in mind that Lockheed Martin developed and fielded the once classified RQ-170 Sentinel back in 2007, known to a lot of folks as the Beast of Kandahar, after pictures of this as-yet undisclosed aircraft emerged of it operating over Afghanistan in 2009. Northrop Grumman followed suit in 2010 with an even bigger and arguably even more secretive stealth spy plane that we, in the public, usually call the RQ-180, but to be honest with you, we still don't even know if that's what this flying wing's actual designation is. Suffice to say that while most of America's new ISR aircraft to emerge throughout the global war on terror were lower cost, non-stealth assets meant to operate in uncontested environments, think the MQ-9 Reaper, there was still an ever-present understanding that Uncle Sam would eventually need to be able to collect intelligence over more advanced adversaries. And we now know for certain that in 2006, Lockheed Martin secretly began design work on a spy plane unlike any other in history. One that would use an exotic new propulsion system to scream through the sky at better than Mach 6, defeating enemy air defenses not with stealth, but through speed and unpredictability, just like the SR-71 did in its prime, except at more than twice the velocity. This program, led by Lockheed Martin's hypersonics program manager, Brad Leland, all but certainly related to a Lockheed patent, filed that same year for a diverterless hypersonic inlet, or DHI, for a high-speed, air-breathing propulsion system that, quote, enables high vehicle fineness ratios, low observable features, and enhances ramjet operability limits. Now, Leland, it is worth noting, was one of the 3 inventors listed on that patent. This work on the SR-72 would continue in secret until 2013, when the firm decided to make its progress public. And I'll quote Brad Leland directly from a 2013 Lockheed press release now. Quote, hypersonic aircraft, coupled with hypersonic missiles, could penetrate denied airspace and strike at nearly any location across a continent in less than an hour. Speed is the next aviation advancement to counter emerging threats in the next several decades. The technology would be a game changer in theater, similar to how stealth is changing the battle space today. Now, Leland went on to say that they believe they could have a single-engine F-22 Raptor-sized technology demonstrator or flight research vehicle in the air by 2018, with the goal of having a twin-engine hypersonic ISR and strike platform in service by 2030. And keep that date in mind, it'll come back around later. In order to power this new SR-72, Lockheed partnered with engine manufacturer Aerojet Rocketdyne to build a turbine-based combined cycle engine, which is, in effect, 2 engines in one. A conventional turbofan for power at lower speeds, and a supersonic combustion ramjet, sometimes called a scramjet, for high-speed flight. Now, turbofans function well from a dead stop and all the way up to past Mach 2, while scramjets don't start functioning well until they're moving at around Mach 3. So this design would allow an aircraft to take off and land under turbofan power while using the scramjet to achieve hypersonic speeds, or speeds in excess of Mach 5 in between. Now, this concept is not unique to Lockheed's efforts, and in fact, Hermeus has had a great deal of success with their Chimera turbine-based combined cycle engine that leverages a turbojet followed by a ramjet in recent years. But according to Lockheed Martin's own press materials that have now been stricken from the internet, they completed ground testing on their hypersonic engine design all the way back in 2017. In fact, in June of 2017, Lockheed Martin's executive vice president and general manager of the Skunk Works at the time, Rob Weiss, told Aviation Week that they were ready to begin building that single-engine demonstrator before reaffirming a service target for the twin-engine SR-72 of 2030. 3 months later, eyewitness accounts of what appeared to be that single-engine flight research vehicle began to emerge out of Palmdale, California, home of the Skunk Works. When asked about these sightings, Lockheed's executive vice president of aeronautics at the time, Orlando Carvalho, did not deny it, instead telling reporters, and I quote, "Although I can't go into specifics, let us just say that the Skunk Works team in Palmdale is doubling down on our commitment to speed. Hypersonics is like stealth. It is a disruptive technology and will enable various platforms to operate at 2 to 3 times the speed of the Blackbird. Security classification guidance will only allow us to say the speed is greater than Mach 5. And then, in January of 2018, just a few months after that, Lockheed Martin's Vice President of Strategy and Customer Requirements in Advanced Development Programs, Jack O'Banion, came right out and said that the SR-72 demonstrator was flying at the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics SciTech Forum, saying the digital transformation made it possible to 3D print the exotic engine with a sophisticated cooling system integral into the material of the engine itself, allowing for what he called, quote, routine operations. And when he was pressed about if that meant the aircraft was flying by Bloomberg's Justin Bachman, O'Banion doubled down, and I will quote his response directly. The aircraft is also agile at hypersonic speeds with reliable engine starts. But as we've covered before, 2 months after O'Banion made this claim, something of a modern hypersonic arms race kicked off, with Russian President Vladimir Putin announcing the development of 2 new hypersonic missiles. Within a week of that announcement, Lockheed Martin had completely stripped their entire website of every single mention of their SR-72 program, pulling down its dedicated homepage and every press release that even mentioned the effort. You could argue that Lockheed just decided to shelve the SR-72 program, but their statements in the months prior and the timing of the digital SR-72 purge probably point to the effort going dark instead, or continuing development in a classified setting with classified funds. Since then, hints of the SR-72 effort maturing behind that veil have bubbled to the surface from time to time, like a video released by the Air Force in 2021 that shows a very fleeting glimpse of a sleek, single-engine aircraft sitting in a dark hangar. And when you slow the footage down and use video editing software to brighten it up, the designation SR-72 becomes visible on its fuselage. And then, of course, in the lead up to Top Gun Maverick's release, Lockheed leaned hard into the idea that their fictional Dark Star hypersonic aircraft that they actually built for the movie may not be all that fictional after all, with social media posts saying things like, quote, Dark Star may not be real, but its capabilities are, and later referencing the SR-71 Blackbird as the, quote, fastest acknowledged crewed air-breathing jet aircraft. And then, in November of 2023, Vago Muradian, the editor-in-chief of the Defense and Aerospace Report, made a pretty significant claim on his podcast. I'll quote him now. There is another program, however, which is for a much more capable reconnaissance aircraft that is the product of the Skunk Works, and it is a Lockheed Martin aircraft. There are articles that have already been delivered, but that there have been challenges with that program. My understanding is that the program was rescoped because it is that ambitious a capability that it required a little bit of rescoping in order to be able to get to the next block of aircraft. Now, this could certainly be in reference to the SR-72 program, with single-engine demonstrators representing the articles that have already been delivered, and the next block of aircraft meant to be the twin-engine operational platforms. But the part we should really focus on here is the claim that the program had to be rescoped because of its ambition. Now, that suggests a program that's running into engineering challenges, seemingly due to technological complexity. And that brings us all the way back around to Lockheed Martin's Q2 losses announced this past July. Remember at the very beginning of this video when I told you that Lockheed Martin reported a $1.6 billion loss in the second quarter of this year alone? Well, the biggest chunk of those losses, roughly $950 million worth, were all associated with a single classified fixed-price aeronautics program that saw, quote, continued design integration and test challenges that had a greater impact on schedule and costs than previously estimated. And in fact, this was just the latest reported losses associated with this specific fixed-price high-end effort. In January of 2025, Lockheed Martin reported another $555 million overrun on this same aeronautics program. These losses were attributed to, quote, higher projected costs in engineering and integration activities that are necessary to achieve those forthcoming milestones, though the milestones they were referencing have never been disclosed. And 6 months before that, they announced $45 million in losses associated again with the same project. And before that, they had already reported some $290 million losses, again tied to the same black program. All told, that puts Lockheed Martin more than $1.8 billion in the red on this single effort. And for a company that saw its profit margin drop by more than 30%, down more than $1.5 billion between 2023 and 2024, those losses are not something that they're scoffing at. Now, it's important to clarify here that I'm not saying that this classified program has, to date, cost a total of $1.8 billion, the actual total cost is classified and certain to be a whole lot higher than that. According to Lockheed's financial disclosures, these overages are associated with a, quote, fixed price incentive fee contract involving highly complex design and systems integration. Now, a fixed price incentive fee contract, commonly referred to as an FPIF contract, is meant to incentivize contractors to keep costs low. These contracts are penned by the government and the contractors, in this case, Lockheed Martin, working together to come up with a reasonable target cost for the platform and a reasonable target profit margin for the firm responsible for building it. Now, that target cost and the target profit are then added together to determine a target price for the overall program. Then, a profit adjustment formula is established. We'll use the 80-20 ratio that's shown in the federal government's Defense Acquisition University breakdown. Now, this ratio reflects how cost underruns or overruns will be shared between the contractor and the government, with the first figure, 80 in this case, representing the government's share, and the second figure, 20, representing the contractors. And it works both ways. So let's say a program has a combined target price of $1 billion, just for conversation's sake. But Lockheed manages to deliver the aircraft $100 million under budget for just $900 million. With a profit adjustment ratio of 80-20, that would mean the government would get to keep 80% of that $100 million in savings, or $80 million, while Lockheed would receive the other 20%, or $20 million, as a bonus for coming in under budget. But the ratio works the same way with overages. If that same $1 billion program goes $100 million over budget, then the government would be on the hook to cover 80% of that overage, or $80 million, while the contractor, Lockheed Martin, would only need to pony up the remaining 20%. Now, this is meant to prevent a massive endeavor, like, say, a hypersonic airplane, from bankrupting the contractor and leaving the government with nothing to show for its investment. Of course, there are limits to how much over budget such a program can go, and we call that the point of total assumption, or PTA. Once a program goes so far over budget that you reach that PTA, the government will no longer share the cost overages, and at that point, the company has to eat those losses entirely themselves. This, of course, is meant to protect us, the taxpayer, from paying into a failing effort forever to keep a firm limping along. Now, because the fixed price contract for this increasingly expensive and secret aeronautics program is classified, we don't know what that target price was that Lockheed has exceeded. We don't know what the profit adjustment ratio is, nor do we know what the point of total assumption is for this program. All we do know is that the effort has exceeded the budget by so much that Lockheed's out-of-pocket penalty is now over $1.8 billion and may continue to climb. And if that 80-20 ratio was used in the case of this contract, and I want to be clear that we can't say for sure that it was, it could be 70-30, it could be something else, but 80-20 would mean that the added expenses to Uncle Sam would be much, much higher, likely closer to $9 billion at this point, in overages alone. All told, that could mean that whatever cost this program was initially projected to reach has already been exceeded by close to $11 billion. That is, unless Lockheed has already reached that PTA point, at which point they'd be eating all of the additional costs alone. And that is possible, considering initial reported losses for this program were reported in the tens of millions of dollars per quarter until just recently, when they skyrocketed up to nearly $1 billion in one quarter alone. And all of this points back to Vago Muradian's 2023 claim that Lockheed Martin's ambitious new spy plane was facing challenges and needed to be rescoped in order to build the next block of aircraft. And that next block of aircraft could certainly be the twin-engine operational SR-72 that Lockheed has repeatedly claimed could be in service by 2030. In any case, it's clear that the research and development costs for whatever classified aeronautics program Lockheed has going on behind closed doors amounts to far more than the reported losses associated with the program. We also know that the Air Force Research Lab opted to dramatically scale back funding for a separate air-launched hypersonic ISR aircraft being developed by Leidos under the name Mayhem back in February of 2024, with the Air Force citing a lack of, quote, operational pull to justify an acquisition program. Now that could suggest lost interest in high-speed reconnaissance operations, or maybe that another, more mature hypersonic platform was proving to be both promising and expensive, forcing the budget-strapped branch to pick one over the other. But of course, there are other possibilities. Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works reportedly offered up an extremely high-end drone fighter design for the Air Force's AI-enabled collaborative combat aircraft program that was deemed too expensive and, quote, gold-plated for the first tranche of CCA contracts. Now, all of this development funding could be going toward the most advanced autonomous fighter platform that this world has ever seen. Or maybe they've got something even crazier in mind. The use of the term aeronautics means they're building an aircraft, but at this point, that's really all we know for sure. So what do you think? Is the SR-72 still on track to enter service in 2030? Has Lockheed Martin run into trouble integrating its turbine-based combined cycle engines into this twin-engine ISR and strike platform? Have costs skyrocketed because of the crash of a test vehicle? Or does Lockheed Martin have something even more secretive up its sleeve? Sound off in the comments below and let me know what you think. And with that, ends yet another edition of Air Power from Sandboxx News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and now merch from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe down below, and I really mean that. I am trying to reach 500,000 subscribers. And while you're down there, leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next. And don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandboxx News.